Looks like my mind just went blank. Well, good morning, friends. Mark Holmes here, and as always, I want to say thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of Joe Boo's Day Job. Sitting here in traffic trying to get down the road. It's a long commute, 153 miles, down to the red brick house, and we're going down there to work on it. You know, the red brick house, because it's so old, you can't do what you do now. A lot of the things that you do in that project are opposite from the materials and the way things are done now. And this has been a learning process because you want to repair, you want to update, but you don't want to destroy. So there's a whole lot of things that are all going in order. The brick walls are literally about 16 inches thick. It's like 3 courses of brick, and they're handmade brick, which are different than the bricks that are made now. And as I learned going to, where did we go? Lancaster Lime Works in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We learned so much reasons why things are failing on old houses. For example, a lot of times you look at old houses and the chimney, the top of the chimney, the bricks are coming off. Well, there's a reason behind that is the bricks are soft. The mortar is kind of like putty, and the moisture, the rain and stuff get into the bricks, and then it freezes and thaws, and it ends up destroying the mortar. The reason why that happens now and didn't happen back in the day was the chimneys were used all year round, or were used during the winter when it was cold. So you had the heat from the smoke going out the chimney that kept the bricks and stuff warm and evaporated the moisture, so the brick and the mortar stayed good. Well, now today that we have modern heat and everything else, and you're only having it basically for decoration, you've got that water that's on the top of the brick that's penetrating, and as it freezes and thaws, it breaks it and it comes loose. And so talking to Jonathan, one of the things that you have to do is, unless you're going to start using the fireplace every day during the winter, which we're not going to be doing, is you need to put a cap on top of it. And he recommended, of course, the best way, if you are going to use it, is basically use the bricks to basically make columns in the corners and put like a piece of granite or a piece of limestone, something that's flat, that will enable the water to drain off of it. He said, do not put a mortar cap on it because that will just exacerbate the problem and make it worse. Okay, I mispronounced it. You guys know I butcher up words. It doesn't bother you, right? Okay, good. So that's a learning process of it. And also, too, here's another problem that you have is the bricks have to breathe. The moisture has to be able to exchange. The bricks are dry as can be on the inside, but they still need to be able to breathe. If you put insulation on top of it, which has a vapor barrier, now that moisture is going to stay on the inside of the bricks. And so what's going to happen is you're going to deteriorate the bricks. So you can't really insulate the bricks wall. So here's the problem and the conundrum that I have. And this is what I learned from looking at the house. When they've made changes to the house, it's made problems for the house. You'll remember, a couple of months ago, we were rebuilding up underneath of it. We had those logs that are up underneath of there that are 203 years old. Actually, they're older than that because they grew before they cut them down. The front side of the logs is where all of the damage was to the logs. Funny thing is, the back side of the house, the logs weren't damaged at all. They were going to rot out because of them being contacted with the mortar and the bricks and everything else. Why didn't that happen on both sides? Well, a simple explanation here. The front of the house, at some point, they put a concrete porch on there. And what happened is, by that concrete porch being there, is the water and the moisture couldn't exchange through that concrete. So now, something that had been dry, and that basement is dry as can be, now held moisture on those logs, and through the course of time, they rotted out. You see where you've got to sit here and you've got to be really, really careful with everything you do. One thing you're thinking, hey, we got a nice concrete steps out here. This is going to be great. But it's deteriorating the brick. So now here's the problem that I have. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because my brother does the heating and air conditioning. And he said, is that going to be a conditioned space? And I said, I don't know if I want to heat and cool the crawl space there, the spot underneath there. He said, you don't need much. He said, you just put a register that's in there. And that got me thinking, because we were going to need to insulate between the floors and between those floor joists. Problem is, if I insulate those cavities and insulate that brick wall, then moisture is going to stay in there, in which case it's going to deteriorate the lumber again even more. So I say all this to say, I'm going to need to condition the space up underneath of there, so that way we don't continue to have more deterioration of the brick and such underneath there. Now here's going to be the issue and the problem and the question that's going to go on here. We're not insulating the brick walls. Now here's the good thing about the brick walls is, once they get warm, they stay warm. It actually radiates heat. Once they get cool, they stay cool. So you've got some natural insulation through there. It's not as efficient as today's modern insulation is, but it's going to have to do, because if we go through and insulate those walls, eventually it's going to deteriorate the bricks. So that's going to be that. The thing is now I've got to explain this to the building department, so that way they understand that you can't do this for the safety of the house. And there's so many different things that we've learned. You know, you can't use regular mortar on this, because that's a hard mortar as opposed to using the lime mortar, which is why we went to, where did we go again? Lancaster, Pennsylvania, getting materials for this specifically. And I have some guys that are going to hang the drywall, and they're like, oh yeah, we can go ahead and take care of fixing the plaster. But learning that this isn't like, let's just go get some, Easy Sand 20, or let's get some plaster repairs and put on there. That ain't going to work with this system. When you think about, and shout out to Jet, who was just in Athens and looking at the Parthenon, this is a technique that's been around for thousands of years, that has lasted thousands of years if it's done right. And there's so many steps to doing the lime mortar that if you don't do it the right way, it ain't gonna stick. And at $55 for a 5-gallon bucket of this plaster, you want to make sure that it's right. And so we're going to literally have to do this the way that it used to be done. For example, let's see if I can reach it from here. While we're sitting here in the press, wood float, hawk, this is going to be crazy. Horsehair. Horsehair plaster. Okay?
That's my horse.
So here's what we learned. We have to take 1/3 of this, okay, and cut it. He said basically take 3 ropes, boom. You're going to take the plaster. You're going to put it on a piece of plastic. Just dump the whole bucket out on there and things. The interesting thing about the plaster is, as long as it's in the bucket, it's not going to ever harden. Just won't. It has to have an exchange and so on. So, if I don't use the buckets up now, it can stay there for another 10 years and it'll still be ready to go. But once it gets that exchange with the other bricks, that's when it'll lose the moisture and dry up. But what we have to do is, we have to go ahead and basically take the mortar, the lime plaster, put it on a sheet, and then we're going to go ahead and just kind of flatten it out. We're going to cut some of the hair, put the hair in, and we're going to fold it over. Put some more hair, fold it again. And you're going to work it into the plaster like that. He said if you don't put it in the bucket, leave it in there, because then it's going to actually deteriorate. But the horsehair is kind of like rebar, and it's going to give it its strength. And so if you don't do these steps the way it's called for, then you're going to have a problem. Now, of course, because it's something new, I'm excited. I want to go ahead and say, yeah, I want to slap some of this on here and see how it goes. You can't do it that way. You have to be patient on this. There is no rush. First thing, rule number one is the bricks have to be wet. And I'm going to tell you, that stuff is dry. It's really dry. You're going to have to wet the bricks down with a mister, basically. And basically he's saying it's about 2 cups of water is what each brick's going to hold. So you start thinking about, a big section. We're talking about, a couple of 5-gallon buckets of water. You're going to spray it down. It's going to get absorbed in there. You're going to come back. You're going to spray it down. And you got to literally do this to the point where when you've missed it, you see it on the surface. Because the way this system is going to work is when you put the plaster on there, if the brick is dry, it's going to suck all the moisture out of there and it's not going to bond. You need the brick as wet, basically, as the lime plaster. So that when they go, it'll have like a suction effect to it. And that's where it's going to get its strength. So, when we get down here, I'm going to fill up the mister, pump it up, pump up the volume, spray, spray, spray. And we're going to spray a section. And then an hour later, we're going to spray it again. And we're just going to keep doing that in between. I'm going to go through the house, have to go under the house, let me spray the wall. Come back up, spray the wall. And then maybe by Friday, I'll be able to have the brick wet enough that it will be able to do that suction. And we'll put our first coat of plaster on. Here's what he taught me. It needs to be a minimum of 3/16 for the base coat. But you can go as much as 1 1/4 inches. So you can really fill it in. Then you need a second base coat on top of it, right? And the way you know that you put next coat in is that you can touch it and just barely push it in. Just push it in. See, it's kind of like a steak. When you push a steak and it goes way in, it's rare. If it starts kind of giving you resistance, then it's getting done. You need to take that sucker off. And just, if you want well-done steak, eat chicken. Eat chicken. So these are the lessons and things that I've taken away from meeting with Jonathan and the problems that we're going to have, because I don't want to do this work and have to come back 200 years from now and have to redo it. Okay, I might be haunting the house with the everybody else that's there and stuff and saying, or they may be haunting me and say, you screwed it up. So we want to preserve this, and we want to make sure that what we do does no harm. I'm Mark Holmes, and at least we're finally through the traffic. Another 2 hours and we'll be there. I'll see you.